We resume our work in the last week. We devoted much attention to the reforms in anti-corruption, in anti-monopoly sphere. Today we are discussing the reforming press office of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and I'm happy to introduce Lieutenant Oksana Gavrylyuk, Head of Communication Press Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Mr. Ruslan Kavatsiuk, advisor to the Chief of the General Staff, Liubov, Tsybulska, advisor to the Head of the General Staff, One Voice Policy Group, Oleksiy, Makykhin, advisor to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and Vilien, Pidgornyi, Security Bloc Communications Coordinator. Good morning, dear colleagues. We have one positive news for you. Just at the very beginning, on Friday, upon special resolution of the Commander of General Staff, we are authorized to carry out the press office reform. Actually, this is a recognition of the tremendous work carried out during the last 6 months by One Voice Policy Group. And we will describe this in more detail a bit later. You might be unaware that One Voice Policy Group is the communication project of UCMC, which has been being implemented in several spheres of presidential administration, in the Ministry of Defense, in other spheres of public administration. And from the very beginning, we have set the following objectives: to increase openness of the armed forces to media, to strengthen the communication procedure, and to reform this procedure. I will describe these objectives and their implementation in more detail, and tell a couple of words about our plans for the future. We work very closely with the communications office of the ministry, and now Tsybulska will speak in more detail about our work in the general staff. Having arrived to the general staff, we immediately realized that the presence of the general staff in media is negligible, and we decided to change the situation. That's why we have carried out some organizational work, found new people to work for the general staff in the sphere of public communication, and found around 60 such people. And we convinced the Ministry of Defense that it should comment on military operations, the most important military operations of the last year. We organized stories and coverage of the armed forces activities in Zerkalo Tizhnya, in Fakty, in many on TV. Also, we involved CNN and other international news agencies to coverage of the general staff work. Also, we have prepared several TV stories about about liberation, for example, Slavyansk and other big military operations, and we presented a special TV story about the events in August and September last year. This TV story was broadly demonstrated by Western media and reflected by Western media. Even the Russian media echoed to it and tried to defend themselves, responding to our stories. And now I would like to give the floor to Vilien Pidgornyi, who dealt with the web journalism project and was very closely involved into infographics and some other projects. You probably already know the project Imperial Journalism. At the very beginning, the obstacles to the project existed in legislative documents, legislative base, and in the internal regulations of the Ministry of Defense. At that time, Tatiana Popova worked in the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and we decided to implement this project. The objective was to allow foreign journalists and our national journalists to visit the ATO area and to stay for some time either in at the front line or in the areas, in the locations where Ukrainian troops are deployed. Very soon Tatiana Popova became the assistant to the Minister of Information, and thus we have united this project with the Minister of Information. Also, we organize everyday briefings of the spokesperson of presidential administration on the ATO issues. As of today, we have more than 400 such briefings. These are briefings based on the double-checked data, and this is very accurate information, very accurate official information. Also, we believe that visual perception of and visual presentation of the real situation is very important. That's why we compile the infographics and post it on UCMC website. And now I give the microphone to Oleksiy. Makykhin will describe another part of our project, presentation of heroes, the latest events in our country, the events of the last 18 months. Had revealed a huge number of heroes, and we discovered that real heroes, they try to escape from media coverage and stay somewhere beyond the cameras, the camera light. That's why our project is aimed at revealing, discovering real heroes and presenting them to broad public. And in course of this project, we very closely cooperated with the Communications and Press Office of the Ministry of Defense Ministry. The first part of our project was the airport documentary, and we took one small episode of this big story one day when the name of cyborgs has appeared, and that first part of our project appeared to be very successful. Now we continue our work, and jointly with Babylon 13 group, we assist other media people to produce visual stories about our heroes. Also, we organized an exhibition of the pictures of our heroes, and this exhibition was demonstrated in the corridors of presidential administration, and nobody, within 4 months, nobody could reach the office of the deputy head of presidential administration without seeing these pictures. Now this exhibition is relocated and demonstrated in the Boryspil airport. On May 8th and 9th, we organized another media events, and on the day of state flag, we organized an exhibition comprising 60 military banners of our military units, very glorious banners. Another sphere of our work is a documentary which will be shown on October 14th. And now I would ask to demonstrate 2 small fragments, 2 teasers, to present this documentary, which we will show on October 14th next month. Will we see it? This is a teaser of the raid documentary. This is about heroic raids carried out by aeromobile brigades. Not so many people know about these events, but these were military operations which allowed us to our servicemen to save the country, to rescue the country. At that time, there was even the bigger threat besides Ilovaisk. There were much bigger threats, the threat of conquering Mariupol by the Russians, and the threat of conquering Kharkiv by the Russians. When around Lugansk there were absolutely no troops. That's why our airmobile brigades carried out the longest raids in the rear of the enemies, and we believe that this should be obligatory reported. And now the military TV group is carrying out production of this documentary. On the other hand, I would like to let you know that these documentaries are produced not and paid not from the state budget, but production is paid from sponsors' money. August 2014, the most complicated phase of counteraction between Russian militants and Ukrainian troops. The biggest blow was taken upon the air mobile troops of Ukraine. They were given the most complicated tasks. This is the longer raid in the history of the air mobile brigades. The first march was carried out by 79th Brigade. We reached the southern border of Shakhtarsk, and then through the rear, legendary 95th Brigade made its raid, and the enemies were around us. With the commander of our brigade, we drive a armored vehicle with only 5 wheels out of 8. We drived under continuous shelling from the territory of Russian Federation. The Russians realized that the terrorists were losing, and on the night between August 24th and 25th, they more than 4,000 Russian troops crossed the border. The Ilovaisk tragedy happened, and 2 more threats appeared: the threat of conquest of Mariupol and the conquest of Kharkiv, because between the border and Kharkiv, and between Kharkiv and Kiev, there were no military capable military units. Why the Russian offense had been stopped? They were stopped because the huge number of their servicemen were killed, and their offense was repealed, and that's why they had to stop and come to the negotiation table. And of course, this was the big threat, and they are very hard times in August 2014 in the raid documentary. We invite you to watch this documentary on October 14th. I would like to add a couple of words about our attempts to reform the public communications sphere in the Defense Ministry. We have created a working group comprising leaders of all the units, departments in General Staff and Ministry of Defense, responsible for communication strategy, and jointly with all these people we produced the strategy of reforming process, and now this strategy is approved by the ministry and General Staff. This is a combined strategy which unites the efforts of all the communication offices and allows them to speak one voice. Of course, we do not think that this development strategy is perfect, but nevertheless, we believe that the framework document, it is able to produce some positive results. Also, we have made some point changes in the Narodna Armia newspaper. When we realized that there are some difficulties for servicemen in the ATO zone with getting information, we decided to turn the existing newspaper into such newsletter which can reach servicemen in the ATO zone. We changed the design of this newspaper. Also, we changed the approach applied by journalists, and the editor's office worked hard to change radically this newspaper. We changed the circulation, we changed the periodicity of it, and many journalists working in the armed forces, they assisted us in this newspaper reform, and currently the newspaper is much better improved, and currently we work on the next issue, how to improve delivery of the new newspaper. We managed to increase its presence in the ATO zone 3.5 times, but unfortunately we believe that if still it arrives with delays. We wish it to be delivered more quickly to resolve this problem of the deficiency of information for servicemen in the ATO area. All the projects which we mentioned, these were separate projects with which we tried to demonstrate how communication sphere could be reformed in the defense area. And now we have received the order from General Muzhenko, Commander of General Staff, to carry out comprehensive reform of communications office in order to produce quality products for internal and external audience. That's why we are very eager to reform the sphere. We will take the best examples from NATO countries and very carefully adapt them to Ukraine, because the Ukrainian situation is much different. On the other hand, we realize that the state budget won't be able to finance all that quality work. That's why we are eager to involve sponsors, support, and we will do our best to allow those people who wish to improve the quality of information about Ukrainian armed forces and about our military sphere, they might be able to contribute to this and choose from the menu. On the other hand, we know that there are much interested professionals among communication companies who might be involved to the defense sphere. Because of limitations existing in the legislation, which prevents from hiring non-military to the military service and prevents from involving top professionals to the communication sphere in armed forces. We will try to overcome somehow these barriers. And we are very much eager to present good results by the end of this year in partnership with journalists, in partnership with communications communities in Ukraine, and in partnership with our foreign partners. One of our big partners is the Ministry of Defense. Ms. Oksana Gavrylyuk is leader of the Communications and Press Office in the Ministry of Defense, and she will say a couple of words about this area. Good morning. Despite the military conflict in the east of Ukraine, the reform in the defense ministry continues, including the press office, in line with the state information policy. Our press office is responsible for communications strategy in the ministry. Besides the projects which were described by my colleagues, I can assure you that we have reformed our office, and we submitted for passage, and they were passed, by the way. We submitted for passage several regulations and bylaws which allowed us to become more open and more flexible, responding to the questions from journalists, and allowed us to meet new requirements. So we changed our strategy working with mobilization. We have radically changed our website. We organized a feedback section on this website where people can ask a lot of questions about mobilization, about monetary provisions, etc. We have opened a special hotline which is called the REAR, where people can call and inform us about shortcomings in food supplies, material supplies, etc. Also, as of today, on the first national TV channel, the 5th channel, and the 24th channels, they have regular programs about those servicemen who come back from the war, from the front line. We have a lot of work to do, and we continue our joint media projects. And there are still some problems. The problem which was discussed on Friday during our press conference with the journalists. You know that jointly with the media representatives, we decided to create one working group aimed at overcoming problems appearing in the ATO zone, and currently we are establishing the working group, and we expect that journalist community will offer its representatives to this working group. And we are very much eager to reform our work from the administration level to the journalists working in military units, and we will request your support, your journalist support and sponsor support, because there is a lot of work to do. If there are any questions, we are eager to answer. Please don't forget to represent yourself. Oksana Shupek, News 1 TV channel. You already mentioned the work with media. flash mob of the journalists working in the ATO area was aimed at changing the military commander of Ukraine, and what change? So the question, what is your attitude to all this situation, prohibition of accreditation, flash mob on the Facebook, and what you planned to do to respond to this situation? On Friday, we had the immediate meeting after this flash mob. I believe that this was a positive meeting because it allowed to raise a lot of critical moments. Probably I won't comment all the spectrum of the issues which were raised. Of course, we understand that the problem exists. Also, we realize that they could not be resolved immediately. These problems which arise shows that the communication system exists, and it has many pitfalls, and this pitfalls could be resolved comprehensively in course of reform. And by the way, decision about the comprehensive reform was taken in advance, and that flash mob shows that the feeling of the problems was common among the administration and among the journalists, and the flash mob on Friday demonstrated. We also are people from external community. Some of us come from business, some of us come from TV community, and we are eager to assist the military to improve the situation. And we believe that due to coordinated work of the ministry and of communications community will allow us to reveal at what links in middle level links the changes should be introduced. The ministry has no intention to hinder the journalists' work, and vice versa. It is very much eager to improve the journalists' work and ability of journalists to reveal problems and allow us to improve our work. Oksana did not mention this, but every day they analyze all criticism coming on the ministry's work and report to the minister and try to understand what should be done immediately, what even interior investigation should be started. So I can convince you that there is a lot of positive work. And by the way, we have many positive feedbacks from journalists who say that, the situation has been changing for the better. At the same time, we realized that in the ATO area, there are a lot of problems, and we should start resolving these problems one by one, step by step. No, we won't. Of course, we could not expect on positive results immediately. Give us 1 or 2 months. Unyan. My question is to all of you, but maybe to Oksana the most. Whether there are any services which carry out censorship, which censor the materials which are shoot in the ATO area, and because it is very clearly that some information which should be classified, which might be informative for the militants, and censorship is such an essential issue. And about this scandal, one of servicemen mentioned that during Ilovaisk he was forced to present wrongful information. The second question is not to me, it's to the general staff. As to your first question, review of the photo and video materials which should in the ATO area is made on the framework of the project military journalism, because all the journalists who attend the ATO zone on the framework of this very project, they are signing a special statement that they agree with this review. As for the reconnaissance information, currently we plan to organize special trainings with civic journalists explaining what could be shown on TV. About the scandal about Nedashkivsky, you should appeal to you should address this question to the general staff. On our side, we can assist you. On the framework of embedded journalism, commanders of military units, where the materials are shoot, they have the right to review photo and video production. When civic journalists travel in the ATO area, they are accompanied by officers, and these servicemen, they provide consultations about recon information, which is prohibited for demonstration. About press officer, whom you mentioned, we will try to clarify the situation, and we will try to understand what's going on. Recently, he retired from the military service, and now I would like to realize what's going on, because there were other serious claims put forward by him, and I believe that we should improve something, but at the same time there are many negative moments, and we should analyze them, what happened. And when press officer steps forward and makes such statements, I think that that's not for the better. Unfortunately, I do not have more information now, because I had no chance to meet with him personally, and I would like, our meeting is already scheduled, and then I will be able to answer. Ms. Oksana, about consultations about shoot materials. So the idea is to organize educational centers for the journalists, allowing them to understand what they can show, what they cannot show. Maybe we should take the Ukraine's latest story, take it as a case, invite the NATO officers, and they might explain what is right, what is wrong. Thank you for this question. We have rather powerful joint project with the OSCE Coordination Office in Ukraine, and on the framework of this project we have planned training for 100 Ukrainian journalists. It will be financed by the UK government. They will be trained on our military base how to make stories about the ATO zone, and this will be next month. 1+1, whether the ministry or the servicemen prohibit the journalist team to shoot in their positions, and what TV channels made TV stories which provided recon information for the militants. On the other hand, we request for truthful information. Unfortunately, quite often the information which we get during briefings, when we ask additional questions, we hear we do not have further information about everyday briefings and about additional questions. It's quite simple and at the same time quite complicated. The information which we receive it from the general staff and general commander. We also double check it via presidential administration. If some local administrations post some information about Ukrainian military losses, which later does not coincide with information presented by the speaker on ATO issues, this is immediately the spokesperson, which information which is put under doubts. Later, the information coming from local administration reveals to be not exact and correct, appears not to be correct, and this is later forgot by journalists. If you have some information, I encourage you to ask your question, and maybe you won't be answered today, the same day, but during the next day, when we double check this information, you will be provided with clear answer. Just repeat your question. As a rule, commanders inform about their losses during 24 hours, then these losses are double checked in the General Military Center, and this General Military Center double checks what is the nature of those losses. Sometimes people are killed in a situations when there is no military action, but still they stay in the military area and there are mines around them, and despite the fact that this is not during military action, but there is a loss, and it is not reported as the military loss during combat. Double checking takes up to 2 days. It can take just several moments, several hours, or up to 2 days. We are able to find information, very correct information, very exact information about names, about military units, etc. Yeah, of course, this is information which we cannot disclose. It is classified information, but we should speak more specifically when the information is not correct, as you say. On the other hand, we are not a state body we assist in establishing channels of communication, which allows to maintain continuous flows of communication, and the group of people who work on information for everyday briefings, they double-check the information from different sources, and they make sure, absolutely make sure, to provide the most accurate information. Their sources of information are from general commander and from different official sources. When the information does not coincide with what exists in the broad public, then we double check. Sometimes when we double check these discrepancies, we immediately see that people quite often do mistakes. They sum up information for the 2-day losses, systemic discrepancies. Could you mention? Yeah. Immediately after Andrew's group was killed, there was information that there was the militants' reconnaissance group who destroyed it, but investigation still continues. There is some information, but still the investigation continues, and might be that primary information which was not faithful. Answering to your question, currently the information which you mentioned is being analyzed, and we had made a decision that all the cases which you mentioned will be subject of careful studies by our working group. There are several such cases. We will discuss them in detail in our working group and then reconcile them with you. Violeta Tarasenko, Novosti Telemost. On Wednesday in Kramatorsk, there was an officer who mentioned that the stories when the military drivers got into road accidents, they distort and destroy the positive image of the serviceman on TV. But how to signal about the problems with alcohol among the servicemen, and we have to raise this problem because this is massive problem, but please advise us how to raise this issue. We would like to make a story about this, but we do not know how to do this. I won't comment on what Mr. Sokolov told you in Kramatorsk, but there are a lot of problems in the armed forces. If we have to concentrate on those problems, we have to give up. But our objective is to create efficient communication channels, external and internals, which will allow us to communicate efficiently and do not try to demotivate the entire country with purely negative information, because we have a lot of positive examples, but the specificity of media journalists is to show more negative and scandalous things instead of positive information. That's why we try to understand how we can resolve real problems with the assistance of efficient communication. We will try to cooperate with the Ministry of Defense units and try to find the ways to resolve the problems. Many individual and systemic problems have been being resolved. In the general staff, the layout is planned, many inefficient units, and it will be reduced and cut down. There is less than 1,000 people working in general staff. There will be even lesser of employees in it. We need to transform it into a very efficient body. Many retired journals are leaving the general staff. Younger officers comes. Many combat officers appear in the general staff, and they are changing the system gradually. The specificity of the situation is that we are in terrible lack of time, and that reform had to be started some 10 years ago, while today we have to change everything very quickly. But the efficiency of the general staff is growing. The combat capacity of our army is much higher. The enemies are bearing much bigger losses. Nobody tries to deny the problems, but we work on resolving them. And now we try to resolve the problems in communication sphere. We will take the best cases from the best armies of the world. We know how to act. We know the experience from business. We can promise you that it will become better. And I would like to add that this is very famous problem. This is broadly known problem, and the general information, the public awareness about it shows that this is well covered in media. But speaking about army, you should understand that this is 250,000 people. The problem with alcoholism exists, and there are a lot of stories about this, and we take measures. You asked how to make stories about this. You should produce the stories aligned with ethic journalism and professional standards. If you see that there is a systemic problem in one unit, you may inform the leader of the commander. Maybe he would be able to resolve this problem easily. If you believe that the problem should be covered at the national level, then you should invite both parties. When the criticism about armed forces appears in TV, we try to respond. The first person to visit the Ministry of Defense every day is his press secretary. The press secretary arrives to work very early. He or she selects the media coverage, and Minister of Defense instructs how to respond to each negative case, either to bring to disciplinary responsibility and to investigate what's going on, and will always respond to each such signal in all the cases. And about the problems with alcoholism. I disagree that the problem is neglected. Several days ago, a group of officers who were drunk were detained, and the minister and commander of General Staff General Muzhenko, immediately initiated investigation, and you can be sure that there is a work in this situation. Of course, the army, which stands on position and not exercising any offense, it is rather difficult to stay in such situation because it is a demoralizing situation. Maybe the last comment, maybe you have some messages for the journalist community. We mentioned everything important. There is the will to reform. I do not think that we will be able to resolve everything within 6 months, but our previous 6 months have shown that this sphere is rather complicated, but nevertheless we will manage to resolve it. I believe that we finally will find a balance between the work of advisors and the work of journalists.